Hello, everyone. Welcome. I think we're going to get going because we have a really packed agenda for everyone today. So, welcome. This is the Journey to Reuse webinar organized by the Refill and Reuse Working Group from the Sustainable Beauty Coalition that brings together beauty brands to advance sustainability topics. And of course, today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, reuse when it comes to beauty packaging. And we have a stellar group of people today. My name's Ruth. I work for Lush Cosmetics and I'm the environmental partner there. Eva?
My name is Eva. I'm the founder of Resources, and it's a news and insight platform that teaches and helping beauty brand about sustainability and especially understanding sustainability.
Malika?
Malika, I guess. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Malika. I'm an associate specialist in packaging reuse and refill, and I work at WRAP, and we're an environmental NGO. Harry?
Hi everyone, I'm Harry. I'm the general manager of the Upcycle Beauty Company. We are a raw material manufacturer that specialises in turning generally food waste into cosmetic raw materials.
Hi everyone, I'm Jo Chidley, the Scottish one with the accent. It's good to see you all here today. I'm the founder of indie beauty brand Beauty Kitchen, but also Reposit, which is a returnable, reusable packaging system, which we'll touch on a little bit later. Welcome everyone, and if we go to the next slide, please. So, the United Nations reminds us that the problem isn't just what materials we use, but the single-use mindset that defines them. This is what places the most unsustainable pressure on the planet and on us as a human race, not the material itself. But in practice, most single-use products today are made of plastic, which has been allowed to go rogue, escaping the boundaries of the systems that created it. And let's remember, plastic has no predators, it has no ecological limits. So when single-use plastic escapes into the environment, into our rivers, into the soils and the oceans, and let's face it, into ourselves, it doesn't reintegrate, it accumulates and it infiltrates. It reshapes ecosystems around its presence rather than adapting to them. We can't, and this is a real moment today, we can't recycle our way out of this. This is not simply a waste problem, it's a systems problem. Next slide, please. Where did it all start? That's where this introduction took me quite a few drafts to get to, because I had to remember back to 2020. And in that year, the British Beauty Council published a report that was called The Courage to Change. If you haven't seen it or downloaded it, please go to the BBCO website. It's all there in all its glory. And it was written at a moment when the world had basically stopped. It was a global pandemic, there was climate strikes, there was social upheaval, but it asked something quite simple, but also something that was quite uncomfortable. What if we can't go back to the way that things were? And, we haven't gone back to the way that things were. The report recognised that beauty, an industry that is so beautiful, it is built on aspiration, it's built on identity and self-expression. It gives everyone on the planet a touch point into who they are or who they could be. But it also has impact, it has real impact. And I'm sure everyone has either heard or seen that 120 billion units of packaging every year globally is made by our industry. Now that means significant water use, it means significant resource extraction, waste that outlives the product itself. But what struck me most wasn't the data, It was really the tone of the report. The report said that we must move forward with courage, not cautiously, not competitively, but collectively. And for me, that really excited me. It explicitly called for something new. It called for a sustainable beauty coalition. Not another certification, not another marketing claim, but a pre-competitive space where brands, retailers, NGOs and policymakers could work together on systemic challenges none of us can solve on our own. Because the problems are interconnected. When we look at climate or biodiversity or waste or water, they're all interconnected. But for me, packaging became one of the clearest symbols of that interconnection. We also know the data that consumers were already signalling to us that 91% want less packaging, 88% want refillable options. And the will was really there, not just from consumers, but also from the industry. But the systems weren't. And that's really where the task forces were born. The Reuse and Refill Task Force is one of those working groups. It's a collective of people that you can see some of them here today on the panel from across the industry. And we're asking, if we were designing beauty today within the planetary boundaries, would we design it for single use or would we design it for stewardship? This is the journey that we're on. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's not about isolated innovation. It's about shared infrastructure. And that moment of courage didn't end in 2020. Fast forward to 2026, and it's the reason why we're here now. Next slide, please. And I think this is over to Ruth.
Thank you. And now we would love to hear from you. So we have a poll with 3 questions on your screen. You don't have a lot of time, so you have to be quick. We start wanting to know where you are. So has your business started thinking about reuse? Maybe you're already doing it, or you're on your journey but started with refills, or you have thought about it but haven't taken any action. Pick your choice. Then number 2 is, what's your strongest motivator to start? So what do you feel it's really the most important aspect of starting on your journey to reuse? Is it environmental issues? Is it legislation? Is it consumer demand? Is it the cost of materials? And then the third one is, do you see reuse primarily as a sustainability initiative, as complying with EPR regulation, as a strategy to create brand loyalty, or as a cost-saving strategy for the business? So yeah, take a little bit of time. We would love to see who's in the room and where you are on your reuse journey. Okay. Give you maybe 30 seconds more. And then Nicole, if we have enough, we can close the poll. Great. All right. I don't know if we can see the answers to the poll, but oh yeah, there we go. Oh, amazing. Wow, 14 out of 21 already doing it. That is awesome. And then environmental issues as the strongest motivator. That is also amazing. And then seeing it as a sustainability initiative primarily. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, we really need the early adopters and the folks that are already thinking about this to help us create really the culture, right? This is a culture change. That's what's needed. And next slide. And this webinar, we have, it doesn't matter where you are on the journey. We saw there are people at different places in their journey, but we're hoping that you still get something out of the next hour and a bit. We're going to hear from the experts on this call and then join them on a panel where we're going to have time for Q&As at the end. And you can see the Q&A button at the bottom menu bar of your Zoom screen. So please add your questions there and we'll pick them up at the end. But yeah, these are some of the things you're going to take away from today: learnings, insights, inspirations, a copy of the playbook and a reuse business model Canva, which is a support tool that you can use. You can take it back to your business and it will support you in getting a reuse pilot figured out. And then, of course, we hope you leave here feeling empowered to have conversations internally to help you move. Next, please. And as I mentioned, this webinar is supported by the launch of the Journey to Reuse playbook that the workforce has put a lot of work. You're going to get a link to the electronic version together with other supporting materials, as I mentioned. And it's an interactive playbook. That's why we called it a playbook, with everything that you need to build a business case for reuse, understanding where you're starting from. It has a summary of the latest research, case studies, and all the questions you're going to need to answer in your business as you develop your journey. So why even do this? I know Joe already mentioned some of that, but there's more. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks very much, Ruth. So again, there is a lot of research out there, and to a certain extent, there's a lot of noise as well. And what we're hoping today is to be able to hone that down for you to have something that's easily accessible. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is very clear that reuse is not marginal improvement. It's one of the single biggest opportunities we have to reduce plastic pollution at source. This isn't about swapping materials or optimizing recycling. It's about redesigning the system itself, moving from disposable to durable, from linear to circular. And that shift changes everything downstream and supports consumer behaviour, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the slides. Next slide, please. So what's in it for me? Well, importantly, reuse isn't just good for the planet. When designed properly, it reduces material and transport costs, it improves operational efficiencies, and it turns packaging into a source of live data and consumer insight. But one of the most powerful outcomes is brand loyalty, which is, one of the golden nuggets we are, as brands in particular, always looking for. So not only are you having the commercial output, you are also doing the right thing. And if we can bring both of those things together, then I think that's around future-proofing not just your business, but that transition away from a linear economy. When customers participate in a return system, when they earn rewards, when they track their impact or physically come back to you, then retention increases. Packaging stops being disposable and stops being that line on the balance sheet or in the accounts, and it becomes a cultural shift. It's then a relationship, and it stops things from being transactional. And we'll show you what that looks like in practice in the case studies that are coming up in a few slides. Checking my notes. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is an extract from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation report, which is, unlocking a reuse revolution. I think it launched in November 2024 and gave us some powerful data and insights into the work that we were doing here in the task force. So this slide captures the economic logic. Single use is cheap upfront but expensive over time, because you have to keep buying the same materials again and again and again. And all we try to do is optimize that particular material, which generally makes things look cheaper as well as maybe be cheaper in the short term, but not in the longer term. And it also doesn't produce the value creation that you're looking at across the business. Reuse basically flips that equation. The initial investment is higher, that is definitely obvious, but every return reduces the cost per use. And the cost per use is not just financial, it's many other things. Some of those we'll touch on today, and the others you will be able to find through the playbook. At scale, the system becomes cheaper, more efficient and more resilient for brands, retailers and consumers alike. But the reason for that is that no one brand or retailer can do that on its own. It has to be done collectively and with true collaborative action. And I think I'm passing over to the case studies. It's probably still me.
Yes.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So here are a couple of case studies. There are many more, and more of those are in the playbook. But I just wanted to highlight a couple that might be relevant for this particular webinar. Next slide, please. So it might seem like a busy chart. These slides, I think, will be available PDF format at the end. Ruth shaking her head, that's great. So you can then take your time to absorb and reflect and come back and ask any questions. But if you look at this chart, the key takeaway here is the break-even point. Zero's reusable PET bottle outperforms single-use PET and HDPE after just 2 uses. From that point onwards, it means that every additional return compounds the carbon savings. But what's also important here is where the emissions sit. So over 40% come from the material production. And if you think about what I said before with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation reports, you know, really that material production and doing it again and again and again is really what is driving a lot of the emissions. While when you look at washing and transport, it accounts for less than 4%. So the environmental advantage isn't just marginal, it isn't small, it is massive, yeah, and it's structural. So once you reuse, you dramatically reduce the need to keep, you know, making the materials again and again and again. Next slide. Okay, so this was the one that took me the longest. Probably because it was really making me think about my own business and the journey that we've been on with Reposit, which has been long and arduous. And anybody that's come into contact with us has felt that as well and been supportive that we are doing the right thing. But what this shows here and what I was trying to show was some of the highlights of what it looks like, you know, in store and on shelf, but then also to hone in from a lot of information. So the progress report that we had completed for Marks and Spencer's is about 140 pages long, and we didn't have time for that. So I honed into return rates. And what this shows is what happens when reuse moves from a pilot to a retail reality. So across the M&S stores, return rates are consistently sitting between 64 and 76%. So that's not niche behaviour and it's not early adopters. That's habit forming. That's the everyday person is engaging with that reuse system. And importantly, this isn't coming at the expense of commercial performance. So returnables have delivered 54% like-for-like sales growth over an 18-month period and is still climbing. So this isn't just environmentally viable, this is demonstrating that it's operationally scalable, but it's also commercially assertive. And when reuse is easy, when it's visible, and that was why I wanted to show you the pause and in store, and it's embedded into the store systems, then customers come back, yeah, and so do the packs. And this report has been presented by Marks and Spencer's as well. So it's not just a Reposit-led, you know, piece of action. And what we have now is an intervention that obviously started as a pilot, but now it is embedded within Marks and Spencer's and it's business as usual. And as there is either refurbished stores or new stores opened, then Reposit will actually be a part of that. And really what we're trying to do here with the larger retailers and larger brands is to be able to engage with a much wider customer base so that it becomes an everyday habit. As customers is really the key to reuse and smoothing out those friction points. But I'm going to hand over quite swiftly to Malika, who's going to go into that in a little bit more depth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jo. That is just a fantastic example of success there. So yeah, brilliant work. Thank you. So at WRAP, as I said, we build strategic approaches to sustainable living grounded in behavioural science. It's not just about communications, but it's about practical interventions that remove barriers and make sustainable behaviours the default choice. So what do we mean by behaviour change and how can we apply it? I know it's a big topic. Jo and Ruth have helpfully set the scene for us. They've explained the why and they've presented the business case for reuse. But how can you bring your customers along with you when you do transition to reusable packaging? Before we get started, it's important to state that reuse is about a circular packaging system. It's not just about a product or packaging design. And for a reuse system to succeed, you need your customers to be engaged and brought in, which Jo has showed us. This is because reusable, returnable, or refillable packaging systems rely on customers repeating a set of new behaviours at the point of purchase, when they're using it at home, and when they're returning it at the end of the life, either from home or at store. And why that's important is because for commercial, social, and environmental sustainability, 90 to 95% return rates for containers is crucial. And this is why reuse packaging systems must consider a citizen user journey perspective. So let's get stuck in. Reuse will require citizens to change their habits and ingrained behaviours and to change the perception of the packaging from waste to something that has value. So where we are now is the consumer buys a product, they use it, they dispose of the packaging, and currently the packaging is perceived as waste with very little value, something to be binned and hopefully recycled. The change we need to do is that a consumer buys a product, they use it, and then the packaging is either collected from their home or returned at a return point. And this is a new behaviour and does require you as a brand to influence your consumers to adopt it. The strategy then for behaviour change is about influencing and incentivising the new behaviour so it becomes a lifelong habit and a new social norm. But don't worry, there is a formula that can be your friend and it's called EAST. And we'll jump into this now. So EAST is an intuitive principles informed by the behaviour science team and developed by behavioural insights team. And it can be applied to thinking through the design of reusable packaging systems to ensure that your packaging is being returned and, importantly, achieving as many loops as possible. So make it easy, make it attractive, make it social, and make it timely. So if we jump first into easy, what we want to do is to make the purchase of products and the return of reusable or refillable packaging as easy and convenient as possible. So my rule 1 is to enable citizens to buy the brand they want, where they want, and to return or refill it where they want, whether that's online or in store. Our rule 2 is that packaging is intuitively recognizable and it's trusted and it has a clear call to action. An example of this is returnable packaging, it has value, I will return it when I go, as opposed to this is recyclable packaging and I'll put it in a recycling bin at home. Rule 3 is to standardize your return process, whether it's bespoke or standardized packaging, and collaborate together on shared and pooled packaging to enable this buy anywhere, return anywhere capability for citizens. Remember, you can still create your USP via the quality of your product and your marketing. It's not just about the physical packaging shape. Moving us on, make the purchase and return of packaging attractive and social. And what I mean by attractive is our rule 4, which is about creating value in the packaging when it is returned or refilled, and create value in the behaviour of returning so that behaviour is repeated. An example of this could be providing incentives for a return in the form of discounts, club or member points, or even not having a deposit at all. and utilize positive language such as return to earn. Our rule 5 is around showing and telling your audience what people like them are doing and creating feelings of reciprocity. Many, many TikTok trends there for you to look at as an example. And then finally, to wrap things up, make it timely. So the timing of prompts and information influences the response and behavior of citizens. So your interventions must meet people where they are and when decisions are being made, whether that's in store or in line or at home. The timing and placement are often as important as the message itself. For example, would you rather be reminded of a doctor's appointment the night before or 2 weeks ago? I know what I would say. So our rule 6 is to provide prompts at various decision-making points, whether that's at purchase or during use or at return or refill, and provide a plan between the purchase and the time of return to create clear value. So my final comment is change the system, change the behavior. Whether it's how products are made, what services are offered, or how the infrastructure is designed, when the system defaults to make it east, people will follow without even noticing. So over to you, Eva.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to talk about the consumer perception and what people think about refill as of today. First, I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the main barriers to refill? What do you think that is stopping people from getting the refill? Is it the price, the availability, the design flows? Just give us, what you think it's happening. And then on the next slide, I'm going to reveal to you the few case studies that we have, the few surveys that we have in the market today. And you will see there's a lot of, and I like what you say, Malika, about the fact that it's a system change, but it's also easy to put in place, but it becomes, easy when it's collaborative, and we're going to see that a bit later. I don't know if we have enough answers, maybe 10 more seconds, and then we can stop and reveal the answers here. I think it's really key to understand the consumer mindset in this, because this will help us to move forward in our product development. Okay, can we get the answers now? Availability. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because I guess if it was more available, people would go to the stores easier. And also, I guess messiness would be the second one, I would think. It's interesting because it was one of the research that was, coming out in the last few years when we did the research 2 years ago. If we look at some of the case studies, for instance, there's a case studies in France that started in 2022. It's called Pharma Recherche. If we can see the figures. Yeah, there you go. So it's been started in 2022. It was first initially started in French pharmacies. And I don't know if you're aware, but the French pharmacies, they function differently than in the UK. So you would have a pharmacist, you would have a lot of pharmacists or salespeople in the pharma in the space. And it's very much people go there for treatments, mostly pharmaceuticals. It's not like a Boots. You have got everything, and you've got the medication as well. But the pharma system in France is very different, where people would buy the skincare alongside their medication. So it's good to see that what's important about this aspect is there's a lot of salespeople that can help you if you have any request. Anyway, they started this in 2022, and it was an automated system. You can see here there's a machine that was placed into a store where you would have a refill fountain for each of the product that you want, and they add a customer and a standard packaging for all of the brands. You could only customize the label. You would take the label from all of the each of the brand, and then you will print the date of the usage, etc., and then you will use this and reuse it again. They found that the refill rate was 63% of this, and customers were about making 15 to 20% savings. But 90% of the users were really satisfied with the way it was done, and 99% of people supported this initiative. And a lot of the feedback that from the pharmacists were people were asking a lot of questions, because the system, the machine was quite visible, and they actually revamped the design now. They're releasing a new design right now. They make it more attractive. They make it easier to read. New signage, bigger signage. They redesigned the logo and the signage, but also they make it more intuitive, meaning, you know, put your bottle here, refill here, tap here, etc. And I found that the easier the system is, and it goes into what you said, Malaika, then the more likely people were to adopt it. And also the pharmacist told us that if you had someone to give them insight and to push them or like incentivize them to refill, they were more likely to refill as well. And also pharmacy, I don't know if you're aware of this as well. I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but they have a lot of like interpersonal relationship with their customers. They know their customers really well. It's a local pharmacist oftentimes, and they find that actually that was really an incentive to purchase more refill as well. It was part of the relationship with the pharmacist. And if we look now to other surveys, there was widely done in France as well about consumer adoption. If you move to the next information, please. We can see that 59% of people in France purchased refill product last year, which is a very higher rate that I thought it would be. For me, it was more like about a 20-30%, but it's 59%. So it means that there's a market for that. There's a need, there's a request, there's a demand for this. The drivers were because it was more ecological. Packaging, less toxic, less material. 70% of the driver is about ecology, sustainability. And the second driver was about spending less money. So the price point is really important. We see that if brands don't give like an incentive about either discount or like, I don't know, voucher for refill, etc., it doesn't pick up so much. So we need to give them an incentive in terms of pricing. Also because of the economic crisis we are right now. People need to spend less money whenever they can. And also more practical, people were like looking for something more practical way to use it. And the main barriers, as we identified when you were answering the poll, is people can't find the product in a refill format. Oftentimes is the availability. It's not available in stores. And if you see that on the store, sometimes you have to buy the refill online. So it's a bit complex to find the refill everywhere you go. And so people don't think about it because they don't see it as well. And this is something, there was a question on the Q&A about the labeling. And I think we need to make the labeling more easier to read as well and more, I don't know, obvious, because for now you see like at the top of the bottom of the packaging, this is refillable jar, etc. And I think it's complex because there's a lot of information that needs to be indicated on the packaging with regulation, with the in-key list, etc. So it's really complex to make this, but I think to make a smoother journey, we will have to improve the labeling. And so the recommendation from that survey was about price reduction, 63%, to make sure that refill are priced lower, better availability in store, and also ensure that no product loss at refill, that the way we do the system, there's no contamination, no messiness, that is really clean to refill, and we don't lose any product in the transfer. And we can see that it's not when you look at the consumer profile on the right side, it's actually not just the ecological people interested in sustainability, but also like beauty in general. Because if you love your beauty product, why not refill it and reuse it all the time? And we talked about loyalty, and it's really key for like hero product. To be fair, I don't think it applies to all of the product in your entire cosmetic range, but in your hero product, it makes a lot of sense. And when you look now at the next survey that was done this year with the British Beauty Council and the Uni Days talking to students, they realized that a lot of the students, 72% of them would be interested in buying refillable product. And also we can see that from the key barriers, one of them, the first one was the price. Again, I think refill are really important when you want to lower the price, because you can have your parent packaging, and then you can buy a refill, and then you have a cheaper option for you to buy from. And this is really a key insight to make sure that to incentivize people to buy product, because it's a bit more affordable. Now, if we look at the end into the, what are the consumer behavior experience, and what is the key learning that we have from all of these surveys, there's motivation, but lack of option or visibility. So we need to talk about it more. That's why we're doing this today. We need to educate. We need to give insights. We need to give it to make it more simple, more easy to adopt. No compromising on the price. At least 20% reduction if we can. when we can, it's important to offer reduction. And also, we talk about easiness, we talk about smoothness, to make it like super nice to intuitive as well, because there's a perception in the market that it's a backward innovation, meaning it's like the milkman model, moving back in time. When actually, when you make like a nice machine, a nice standardized process that is really intuitive and super nice to use, and you feel rewarded as well when you use it, I think it's really important to make people feel good, and it's about elevating experience, make the experience enjoyable, memorable, and rewarding. It's important to think about this because at the end of the day, we're buying beauty product, we're not buying anything else. It's about enjoyment and indulgence as well. So now I'm going to give the mic next to Malaika again, she will talk about the packaging regulations.
Thank you so much, Eva. So it's clear that with consumers wanting their brands to commit to more sustainable practice, checking that your packaging matches your external commitments is important for your consumer loyalty. But the regulatory landscape is also changing and impacting the way you as a brand use packaging in your supply chain. And it is vitally important to stay ahead to meet these requirements. So I'm now going to comment on 3 packaging regulations which are moving reuse from innovation to obligation. So EPR, Packaging Extended Producer Responsibility, is already in effect at the moment, with the first invoices being sent by Pack UK in October 2025. So a few of you on the call will already be aware. The aim of the regulation is to shift the full cost of dealing with household packaging waste from local taxpayers to packaging producers, applying what we call a polluter pays principle. Now, as a policy, it does somewhat support reuse because reusable packaging is only charged the first time the packaging is placed on the market and not for subsequent reuses. So this is designed then to incentivize a shift from single use to reuse. But businesses will need to keep audits if that packaging is being reused in practice. To go even further, it is hoped by many that the regulation, there will be opportunities to divert saved PEPR monies into the development of reuse infrastructure, something which happens in France. So there is now a commercial incentive for moving to reuse as well. In 2025, the reuse consultancy Go and Package produced a report which revealed that moving to 30% reuse delivers £136 million in packaging EPR savings per year. And on average, we saw a 94% reduction in fees per item if switched to reuse. So the commercial argument is getting stronger. Secondly, with plastic packaging tax, this is a tax which applies to plastic packaging components manufactured in or imported into the UK with less than 30% recycled content. Now, the goal of this is to incentivize the use of recycled materials in packaging, but it has been increasing annually in line with inflation, and therefore reducing the amount of packaging you place on the market through reuse could reduce your exposure to this tax. Now, the third regulation we'll discuss today is the EU's packaging and packaging waste regulation, which is a big one. As a general date of application on the 12th of August this year, and many targets being reported against from 2030. The regulation will reduce packaging production and associated waste and improve reuse and recyclability. And importantly, all businesses placing packaging on the EU market, which includes UK exporters and businesses selling into Northern Ireland as well, will need to prepare for the significant implications that the PPWR will bring. So if we look at reuse specifically, there are binding reuse targets for beverages, mandatory refill space in supermarkets, and reusable options required for takeaway and food service formats. But it's the secondary packaging targets which will apply to all business. By 2030, 40% of transport packaging sales and packaging, including e-commerce, must be reusable within a reuse system. Now, this does exempt cardboard boxes. So the detail of the targets is going to be further specified later in the coming years with the adoption of implementing and delegated acts. And what we're keeping our eyes peeled for is that in 2027, the EU is going to establish a European observatory on reuse. And this also includes determining a minimum number of rotations for reusable packaging. Now, whilst it may seem that 2030 is a long way away, there are things that businesses can do to get ahead now. So what we say is start by completing an audit of your packaging and look at what others in the sector are already doing with reusable packaging. And our playbook, which you'll have access to at the end of today, is a great start. Now, a final comment from me is reuse is at a turning point now. We have the momentum, we have regulation, and we have innovation. And now we need the reuse systems that people will actually use. And being part of organisations like the British Beauty Council and WRAP can provide clarity to complex regulations. Thanks so much. Over to you, Harry.
Thank you, Mike. Well, I guess it's actually over to all of us, really. So we're going to start the round table. So there's a few points from the presentation, and I think it's worth going into more detail for some of them. So Eva, I'll come to you first. We said over 80% of consumers say they want reusable packaging, but only 16% actually use them. From a behavioural perspective, is this a failure of consumer willpower or a failure of the industrial design?
For me, it's more to do with experience because we made the refill very we simplified the refill process, but we forgot that we're doing it into the beauty industry. As I said, we're all about experience and indulgence, and we're selling beauty product. We're not just saying like food, and for me, it really is down to experience, but also collaboration. This is something I didn't mention into the slides, but this is part of the feedback that we have. We have to collaborate all together for this to work, and this is what Joe mentions as well, and also everyone here knows that we can't do this alone. It won't be working alone unless we collaborate. And so I think the fact that it's not available everywhere, that it's not really there where we want to be, is because we are building the process, we're building the system, and we've been working on a linear system for months and for years, and now we need to move into a circular system. So it's going to take years. And I know you said, Malek, 2030 is a long way away. For me, it's tomorrow, because by the time we develop a product and we put a system in place, it's going to take time. And I think, for me, it's not a failure. It's the fact that we are building up the system, the economy, etc., for this to work in this way. And I hope that in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, we're going to see a refill station in Selfridges, in Boots, in Liberty, everywhere that you go now, you will be able to see a refill station. And I want to mention something, for instance, like an example of the maturity of the culture. We need to come to a culture where we are mature about this topic. Think about beauty supplements. It wasn't really like something that we were consuming so much in the past years, etc. It was very in American market was very like mature market for that, but for us in Europe it was not something we were doing. Now you see beauty supplements, you see supplements everywhere on the market, and people are aware that this is part of their beauty routine. Now they will have supplements into their beauty routine, and I think for refill is the same. We're going to come to a point where the culture is going to be mature enough to be adopted everywhere, and this is why we need to be here today. You need to be advocating with us as well to make sure that we implement a refill system to make it available. This is not a failure. This is a growing system.
Thank you, Eva. I should have actually asked if anybody does have any questions, please do just put them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. Malika, do you have anything to add on to Ruth's point? To Eva's point there, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. I was thinking about this, and again, I probably don't want to use the word failure like Eva said, but I think we hear quite a lot about the intention action gap, and I think this is more around the system design rather than a fault of the consumer. I think if we're really thinking about closing the intention action gap, we need to make sure that we're reducing the consumer effort. So again, how I spoke about East, we need to make the return of returnable packaging really easy. As Eva touched upon, we need to ensure there's cost parity with single use, and we need to address those perceived hygiene concerns that come with using reuse and refill systems. I think I'll underline this one and say that reuse solutions must meet customers where they are and integrate seamlessly into daily lives as well. But it's about systemic support, really. I think that's key to making those choices into habits, and simply designing refillable options isn't enough. We need to really think about the system and the journey and meet consumers where they are and look at their daily routines and how reuse can be embedded into that.
Yes, I guess people are fairly stubborn, aren't they? They're set in their ways. They don't want additional change that's going to mean they have to completely change the way they live their lives.
it's change management. We know that people are always resistant to change, so we need to bring it in a positive way.
Yes, thank you. Okay, second question then. Ruth and Joe. So as we mentioned in the opening, we acknowledge that we can't recycle our way out of the plastic crisis. What are the initial barriers that must be overcome to stop managing waste rather than eliminating it by moving to reusable models? Ruth, let's go first.
Sure. Just to say that one of the reasons that I really wanted to be part of this task force is because it has been so hard to get refill and reuse really established at Lush. And I thought, well, how can I help overcome the barriers that, we have within the brand? And I think it's worth saying that we have had a take back scheme for a really long time. Our take back rates are fairly good, but not good enough for reuse. And we even created our own recycling center. So, like, we can see firsthand that recycling is not the solution. And we are also creating a lot of problems. So, we still need people to recycle, but that is just a step in the way. And the culture change to reuse is really what's needed. And I think some of the mistakes we made at Lush, we played a lot with makeup, reusable makeup and lipsticks that you could, refill. And I think you really need, Eva mentioned that. I think going for your hero products, the products that customers will come back quickly for. I think one of the challenges for reuse in the beauty industry is that the products take a while for you to use. And starting with products that are hand wash, liquid shower gel. And the other thing we've done at Lush is provide reusable containers for naked products. So I've always felt that that was our way of making a contribution. And then customers, just own that asset, right? But what we're talking about here is a shared asset. And as in, we collectively own the packaging. The packaging, we have a collective system that takes care of the packaging, or the customer owns the packaging and is just coming for the product. And I was thinking about the question, and I thought actually the best thing the brands could do right now is to advocate for some of our EPR money to be used to building the shared infrastructure. I think businesses actually going to government and saying we need the legislative incentives for us to be doing this. And I think with EPR and all the burden of packaging tax now is so great that it's going to begin to make those options more available. So at Lush, we're really trying to get a full overview of the cost of packaging, of single-use packaging the next 3 years to build a business case for reuse and say, actually, it's going to be cheaper in the long term. And I'd say that is the biggest barrier. That and, of course, bringing the customers along. But those two things can be helped by legislation. Joe?
I know
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I know
Yeah.
there is just a lot to unpackage, isn't there? No pun intended. And I think for me, the shift is trying to get in the mindset of innovation. So if things are put in the bucket of new product development or new package development or a redesign, all those words that are used within our industry, because for years, if we think about the single-use system, we have optimized it, to the nth degree. It's lighter packaging, it's recycled content, it's better recyclability. And that work matters, but there's a plateau and we're still feeding the monster because it's still single use. So we have to turn it on its head, and we're still designing for that aspect of throwaway. I mean, even if it is recyclable, we already know that you're less likely to recycle it if it's in the bathroom than if it's in the kitchen, because, we're human. and that's it. And I think the more that we think of ourselves in what are those changes, and what if we look at packaging that it isn't waste at all? What if we then look at it as if it's an asset? And that's really what we've done for the last 10 years in the work that, that we've produced, not just in terms of the system, but in all of the different collaborative networking support that Beauty Kitchen has been part of. So the moment that you see packaging as something that you should circulate and that it doesn't disappear, the entire redesign brief or new packaging innovation, changes. It's no longer about managing waste streams. It's about designing out waste altogether, and that's a very different conversation internally. So the journey that I've been on, and we've been on as a business. We certified through the Cradle to Cradle certification, and this was back in 2018. Yeah, and I suspect, so that what's that? It's nearly 8 years. And even 8 years down the line, I suspect there's very few people on this call that even know what Cradle to Cradle is. And actually that's okay. But as a chemist, what it does is it gets you into the molecular understanding of your products and services and how can you design them for circularity. So the process of going through that certification with Beauty Kitchen's products, for instance, it just really unlocked the way of thinking. And from an organisational perspective and the stakeholders that we have to manage, which are generally all large, much larger than we are. I'm just very noisy. Larger organisations, it's about facing in and talking their language. And generally innovation, new product development, has a profit margin. And that's what we have to find the language of business that works within reuse and refill. And that's taken ages.
And just to add one little thing that you showed in your M&S graph, I think the market is so competitive right now, especially with social media viralizing, something different every time, that loyalty is a really important currency at the moment. And I think refill brings that relationship that is so important at the moment.
Yeah, some of the slides that I couldn't necessarily show because we were tight on time is that in some of the stores in Marks and Spencer's, the way that they have the returnable packaging is next to the single-use option. So they've actually got the space to have the two options. And the returnable packaging is outselling the single-use. So what that tells Marks and Spencer's is that it's converting customers, not only the ones that are currently buying Marks and Spencer's, but ones that weren't before because of the returnable packaging system. And you've then got that's a different, but the challenge that we have as a system is we're then having to talk to many different stakeholders. So when we talk to Marks and Spencer's, it's not just sustainability. We're having to talk to finance, we're having to talk to marketing, we're having to talk to all aspects of their business as a small independent. And that's really hard. So coming back to your advocacy, anything that can be help to replicate what they have in France, where some of that grant money is then pushed back into the infrastructure, will support innovative organisations like ourselves who are self-funded and bootstrapped to be able to, manage that more effectively and efficiently and then bring down the cost. And that's ultimately what it's about.
Yeah, you talk about profitability, and I really see a shift now in the brands compared to 5 years ago when I started the business. Like, I really see that people are not working in silos anymore. I talked to a few brands in France, and they're all working together. So the marketing is working with sustainability, is working with procurement, is working with packaging innovation, and also ingredient innovation, which wasn't the case even 5 years ago. And not just in France, like in the UK, I had a meeting 2 weeks ago was the same, and everywhere people are aware that we used to work in silos, and if you want to be really circular, we need to work together. And something that really see a shift now, which wasn't the case again a few years ago, but it's the shift now. People are ready to invest the money, and they know it's going to cost them initially. There's an initial investment, as you showed, Joe, but we know that it's a long-term prospect. And because we've been working on a very short cycle, what is the Q1 result, Q4, whatever, year 2025, we're not looking at like annual result anymore. We're looking at longer term long-term, impact. And I think this is a really big shift, and that's why we're struggling right now, because we're still working on a short-term mindset and CFO, like finances, like return on investment, etc. And I think for refill, the return is going to be much larger but much longer term. And I think this
Yeah.
is an awareness, and people have an awareness of this. And to comment on the EPR, in France, it's true that the EPR scheme is financing like refill system, and there's a way that we can, ask that to the government. And so talking about, profitability, it's coming all together, having a simplified packaging. But also, I want to say, I don't want to make it too simple, because I think the parent packaging, something that you keep, should be like a keepsake and a collectible packaging. We need to move away from the waste, and the waste element is giving some more attribute to the packaging, some more value to the packaging. And you have a nice shell, that you keep refilling, and then it's something that is worth keeping with you and having with you, etc. And I think this is a move that I see in more like luxury segments, but I'm sure we can do that in other segments as well.
I wanted to just add about profitability as well, that again, it's like we are externalizing all the costs of single use to the environment, to communities, as pollution, as microplastics, as costs to the healthcare system, and even costs for the business that are hidden because they are on other parts of the balance sheet, right? But once you bring it all together, then single use is much more expensive, because it's also causing climate change and biodiversity laws, right?
Well, you
So
can't compare the
it,
two.
yeah, you cannot compare. It's just a fallacy that it's actually more expensive. But the capex for getting all the assets and the reusable packaging, yes, that is an outlay, and that's why we maybe need to create financial products, right, that can support that mechanism through
Yeah,
government grants and all of this. Yeah.
I think, Ruth, that's where policy kind of needs to step in. I think there is a bit of skepticism still around reuse, about the upfront costs, and I think things like EPR are making it even more reuse a more commercial conversation. But I still think there's a little bit of skepticism, and I think that's why we really need regulation. We need to create a level playing field. We need to signal to business stability, and businesses need to collaborate with others to share costs. Like, that's one way of avoiding like the high upfront costs, is to share and pool things.
And I
Well, and
think
that's
we
where
need.
it's sorry, Eva, when you go.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I
Yeah, I
was just
wanted to
going to,
say it's good to talk to retailers, and the fact that you have like something with M&S is really key, because you need, and oftentimes the retailers is also like someone that wouldn't be convinced, and I think we need to have retailers in the conversation as well.
yeah, definitely. And it's about a leasing model, and leasing packaging is just, something that was never heard of, really. But a leasing model has been, the driver of the circular economy since the beginning of time, really. It's just getting used to how does that work within the current business environment. So
Yeah.
policy and bringing us all together is the key here. And answering not all of the questions, but coming back to something that Ruth says almost every single task force meeting that we have. This is about progress, not perfection. And as long as we're happy with a little bit of mess, yeah. And I think in the beauty industry, you are, because you're trying to make things look beautiful. I think you are generally happy with the mess.
And again, I want to say, like, compared to 5 years ago, I can see that people are ready to not fail, but like try and test things. When before they were like, oh, I don't know, I want to see what people do, and then maybe I will jump in. Now I really see that people are ready to try, which is a big shift, I think, in the beauty industry. Anyway, I guess we could move to the key takeaways now. I think we answered a lot of the questions now. I don't know.
Yes, I think we probably have. Yes.
I
So I guess, well, looking forward to the sort of next steps of what could be done in the sort of, well, next days and even next few years. So if there is one micro action a brand or retailer could take tomorrow after reading the playbook, listening to this webinar, what would it be to ensure they are still part of that 16% this time next year? I don't know who would like to start this one. Maybe let's start with Ruth.
Oh, I think it is finding the key product where reuse would have co-benefits, right? Because of loyalty, because it's a product that you want the press to talk about, because, we're still at a stage where if you implement a reuse system, you also get tons of press, right? There is a brand value of doing that. So being really strategic about the product and the packaging, that you feel you can make it easy, and then contact Reposit. Like they have the infrastructure. They're ready to go. It's a way of experiment in a very safe way, because you have a system that is already reducing a lot of those barriers. So calling Reposit would be my micro action, and they'll help you choose the right product. I said it, Joe, so you don't have to.
Thank you. I hate saying anything like that. But there is, just to build on that, it is about onboarding. And when you think of your new product development process, whether you are a product-based business or a service-based business, you will have that process that you go through. What we entice people to do here is, depending on that hero product, it depends, whether it's an emulsion, it's a wash on or a leave on, wash off or leave on. There's a load of different things that we can cascade to go through to then give the options of what would be the best type of packaging. Because if we come back to the packaging element to it, if we look at that landscape at the moment, there is hundreds of thousands of options that are out there. But if you then look at reuse or returnable or refillable, the options do come down significantly. Yes, but there's a reason for that, and that is to drive the collective action. Yeah, and that it's not just one brand and retailer or a consumer base that's driving that. It's around the whole journey.
There was also, sorry, I'll wait for you. And then there's a question in the Q&A that I think is worth answering.
Okay. Well, it's going to come to Malika.
Okay, right. I'm going to cheekily say two things if I can, Harry. I think focus where refill really beats single use. We need to think about these high volume, frequent purchase categories with simple logistics that was mentioned. And then I really think online opportunities, there is big opportunity for reuse within e-commerce. It just makes sense. I think if you look at Ocado Retail, for example, I've put that in the chat. They have a great returnable packaging scheme, which is delivering great results for them. So yeah, that would be my 2p, Harry.
Steps. Eva?
Yes, I have to agree with everybody that I think choose one product that you can turn to refill right now, just one, and see how it works. And I would say, because I think, again, it doesn't make sense to have the entire range into like refill, because it wouldn't work, but choose one and then make it work.
Yes, I think finding your largest volume product to start with is probably the best step, because it's not only is it going to have the largest impact, it's also most likely to be the one that financially makes sense to do it to. Okay, now looking longer term in the future. So we looked at next steps, but then how does this look in, say, 2030? If we meet again in 2030, what would the reuse percentage need to be for us to consider this task force a success? Who wants to go? Joe, perhaps? Or Ruth? Okay, you've got your mic.
I think I would say it would be really good to have 80% return rates with M&S, with the people doing it. I think that would be amazing. And then I'll let someone answer the percentage of, the market.
So I think by 2030, reuse shouldn't feel innovative. It should feel the norm. If we're still describing it as forward thinking, then we really haven't gone far enough. I suppose in numbers, I'd want to see at least 40% of beauty packaging operating within a reuse refill system to call it a structural shift, where it is, the norm. But the real signal, I think, won't just be a percentage. It will be that you see that visibility that we talked about in the beginning, and actually the poll was echoing that as well, where you're seeing it and it's accessible, it's visible, it's merchandised in the right way, whether online or in store. So there's not just the brands that are behind it, it's the suppliers to the brands, but also the retailers. I think if we can demonstrate that that we're all, visibly moving forward, that will
Mhm.
be more of the sign of success. So if you think of it in a supermarket where people still use plastic bags, but you see now, a lot more people with their reusables, whatever they are, than you ever did. I think it's that symbolic shift where it becomes the norm.
Yes, absolutely. I guess going back to the plastic bags, I think everybody's got rid of their sort of hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of plastic bags that were kept underneath the sink, haven't they? And moved on to others. Okay, thank you for that, Joe. I think we have a couple of questions that some have been answered in
I
the
think
chat.
we've answered all of them, but there is an interesting one about packaging and labeling, which I think is perhaps worth answering. I know, Joe, you said we would cover, but I'm not entirely sure we talked about that. Yeah, we talked about the retailers, folks both in beauty spaces where they are not the brand or they are the brand, but the salon won't do the uptake of refill, So I think the more we talk about it and use the East framework to help create the right incentives for people to adopt refill. I also think, if you are working with selling beauty, but you're not a brand, start with the brands that are already doing refill, like Circle Beauty, like Faith in Nature, Beauty Kitchen. I think there are many that are the early adopters that can still need our support, to
Mm.
make this popular. Any other questions that you want to, I don't know if you want to answer anything like publicly
Well, there was
or
the
I
not.
specific question on the packaging and the labeling in particular.
For me,
Uh,
there's something I would say about the packaging. I don't, sorry, I didn't bring my box, but I think for me, we need to imprint in the packaging some sort of like arrow, something that would say this is refillable. Because I find, once you use your packaging, you throw the outer packaging, But I've seen a packaging where they use actually the side of the packaging, like there's a serum where they have actually imprinted like a footprint, no, foot, sorry, fingerprints onto the packaging. So you have to press here. And I think this is really smart. But moving to this kind of system to show that this is actually, you can remove that, you can refill that way, you can have an arrow this way. I think that may simplify the way people look at the packaging and they remember to use it. Like I've been using a cream and then I said, oh, I wonder if this is refillable. And then I was able to remove the cup inside, but I didn't know until I tried. And I think, making like using packaging as the message.
I know there's global work going on around a reuse symbol that everybody can use, so we know it's
Mm.
instantly recognizable as much as the recycling icon. I think Joe's
Wow,
dug
that's
around in
amazing.
her goodie box of products to share
Yeah,
something with us.
I mean, it can be something as simple as, a QR code. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, this is obviously Reposit, and this is a 60 ml jar, which is, fairly standard. It obviously depends on the space that you have, and it definitely has to be on the primary packaging, without a doubt. We've gone through many different aspects. Again, that would be, part of the onboarding because the label material particularly for if it's going through some sort of washing cycle, and so that would be reuse or refill because you would be washing your container or somebody would be washing your container. So at the moment there is only a very small amount of different label materials that either make it through the washing cycle or are easy to remove to renew. But we are working with, Avery Dennison, for example, on the innovation of what that would look like. And that's really around this driver for innovation. But I also wanted to add something here around that. Indie brands generally drive a lot of innovation because they tend to be in that very curious, questioning mindset. And I wanted to signpost on the salon, for example, which is prime really for refill in store, but also for reusables and returnables. And I do think that some of the larger, organisations like L'Oreal need to really, be at the forefront of that because they can it's not that they can make a change instantly, but they can, once they've taken the 3 years to make the change or whatever the number of years is, it would be so huge and make such an impact to all the rest of us within the industry. So maybe that's my call to action if there's anybody from L'Oreal on here.
Let's see.
We did have one question about online for online businesses
Yes.
about the system. See, Ruth and Malika have both had a response on there.
Yeah, I think the waterless I mean Lush, we've been removing water from the product, and that is the number one thing you want to do. It really reduces the amount of packaging, like the package, and also we use so many recycled materials. The packaging footprint that we have is so much smaller than other beauty brands. But we can't remove the water out of everything, right? So some customers still want to use creams and liquids. And like Able and Co, I also mentioned Able and Co, they have a great example, but their stuff is actually more expensive. So they're not, if you buy from the zero waste rather than packaging, you're paying more. So I think you have to be like a deep green customer to go in that direction. I think we really need the case where either the customer buys the packaging for life and then gets a cheaper product, or you have a lot of incentives for returning the packaging. Yeah, but incentive is huge at the moment. And I think with the cost of living crisis, it can really push the culture to reuse if we get the incentives right.
Yeah, and I also think cross category. So, Malika mentioned earlier in terms of the different packaging directives, and if we look at beverages, we know what is coming down the line in terms of reuse. So, every person that buys a beauty product also buys beverages. So I think when there's that cross pollination, that also helps to support the not just the infrastructure but the mindset change as well.
Okay. All right. Should I do key takeaways?
Yes.
All right, everyone. I will just grab my notes. So I think we are coming to the end of the webinar. It's the last 4 minutes. I think today we've heard so many things. Luckily, all of it is in the playbook. And what I'm taking away from is that reuse is a system shift, not something that we can just tweak as a niche. And when designed well, it can reduce emissions, cut long-term costs, build loyalty, especially if we can have shared infrastructure and collaboration. And we talk about the need for advocacy from businesses. Then we also heard about behavior and experience being as important as the packaging. So making reuse easy, attractive, social, timely, so we can really move from good intentions to high return rates and new habits. And then, Eva said that at the end, start small but strategic. Malika also said that pick one high volume, high loyalty product where refill clearly beats single use. Pilot through either our existing reuse infrastructure or by having the packaging sold as an asset. Learn fast and then build from this progress, not perfection. So, and we would love, thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure, also a pleasure to be with my colleagues. We have these discussions all the time, so we're just letting other people watch our discussions in the working group. And yeah, this is the Refill and Reuse Task Force. Now I think it's your turn to create a culture of reuse. If you can think of a next action that you take away, please add it to the chat in the next 2 minutes. And you're going to find an email in your inbox with the video recording and a link to the playbook, a PDF of this presentation, a feedback form. We would love to hear from you so we can keep this engagement around reuse journey. And if you're super passionate about this topic, we also would love for you to join our task force. So that's it, closing and wishing you a good journey to reuse. Yes, if you have a little next section, I don't even know if people can use the chat. Maybe they can't use the chat. But anyway, it's in the feedback form. So if you can think now, so you don't forget, write it down, what's your next action? And then we hope you let us know through the feedback form. Thank you so much. Thank you to the task force. Yes. And you can hire us to go do this in other places that you think for people that need convincing around reuse. Hire us. No, hire, we do it for free. Just invite us.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.